We'd like to call to order the meeting of the Provo Municipal Council and the Redevelopment Agency Governing Board work session agenda. It is 12:02, Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. The elected officials here today are Councillor Becky Bogdan, Councillor Catrice McKay, Councillor Rachel Whipple, and Councillor Craig Christensen. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions, unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use a microphone so the voice is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, step out of the workroom. We'd like to recognize that Councillor George Hanley has joined us. It is proposed we approve the following minutes: April 30th, 2024 council meeting and May 14th, 2024 work meeting. Are there any objections or requested changes? Seeing no objection, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. All right, our first item of business is a discussion regarding a resolution to place 1.18 acre parcel of ground located approximately 200 North Lakeview Parkway on the surplus property list and authorize the mayor to dispose of the property. This is presented by Tara Riddle.
Good afternoon. Before we get started, I just wanted to announce, and I think Justin may have put this on your calendar, that we do have a My Hometown Day of Service coming up on the 27th. We'd love to have you join us. We've got a couple projects going on in the neighborhood, as well as a project at the community church on 2nd North on University Avenue. So it should be a really productive day. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is a surplusing of property that's along Lakeview Parkway. So this property was acquired back in 2017, right before we started building the road. And we found that there was a rather large piece, just over an acre of property that we aren't going to need. And the property owner that's located just to the south, who's getting ready to develop this into an industrial piece, would like to incorporate this into their property as open space. So this property is, like I said, located right next to the river. So there are some restrictions as far as what they can do on it, because it's within the setbacks. They can't put any buildings on it. So what we're seeing, maybe some trails going through here. They may have some of their parking lot on it, but we think this will be a productive use of the property and something they would continue to maintain for us. So it is just over an acre. We went ahead and did a departmental review, and none of the departments expressed interest in needing the property for any future projects. We had it appraised and it came back at $126,500. And that's what the adjoining property owner has offered on the property. So what we'd like to do is have this considered during regular council meeting on August the 6th. So if there's any questions on that?
I have a question, Tara. What you say they want to do is open space. Are they already a conservation easement, or who owns this? What is what's
so we own it.
Right, sorry, the land that the people that want to buy it, what is their other property being used for?
So it's vacant right now, but they're planning on putting in industrial use. So I think they're putting some kind of manufacturing or office space or something on the building. It's called the River Bend. So they're going through the process of getting approvals right now. Yes.
So when you say that they can put a parking lot, I mean, is this deed restricted?
It is not deed restricted. We actually have an ordinance that it's within the 100-foot setback of the river. So no structures can be built within that 100 feet.
And it's not deep enough given the shape of it.
Right. I can go.
So there's no chance that it would be, I just hate it that close to the river. I'd rather it stay open than have to build any kind of building so there's no way they can build on that.
Right. In fact, if we wanted to include something in the deed restricting it so that it, 100 years from now, if we still do not want any buildings there, we can put that.
I would be in favor of that.
Because the appraisal actually reflects that they would not be able to build on it. So that's not an issue.
But to clarify, you said something about a parking lot. So is a parking lot?
Parking lot all the way down in this area.
They legally can't do that.
But that's as far as they can go. It's just what, that first little bubble or something?
Yeah. So if you want me to add the deed restriction, I can do that.
I would be, I don't know if we need a motion for that, but I would certainly
I
be in
would
favor
say-
of that.
I think we're,
I would
yeah,
third that.
let's just do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like.
That's easy.
So, and the new park is just across.
Across the river.
So I'm a little curious as to
Well,
why
it's a-
Parks and Rec didn't think that was desirable, maybe for our own purposes. Is it just because it's right next to?
So actually,
development?
what you're thinking is the park is actually through the fields.
To the northeast?
Yeah.
Yes,
It's kind of kitty corner to it, right?
right.
So what's directly across the river?
Right now it's vacant. There's
But-
nothing there.
That's the Colton Burr property. But the Display Ranch, the Colton Burr property.
No, I don't think the Cold Bird property goes up that far.
Mike.
It goes all the way to I didn't think it went all the way to the.
No,
parkway.
it's the Display Ranch is right there on the corner, right? Right there on by the Parkway. And then the Burr property is a little bit further west.
So what we're looking at right there is the Despain Ranch.
Yes.
So that's not going anywhere.
No.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was a little curious.
It's further east where the parking stuff is. Okay, any other questions on this one?
Well, I maybe just keep following on that line of thinking. So parks are, I mean, because even if. And again, I don't know exactly where the park is, but I just thought, why would we be giving away a parcel of land that's so near a park that's right on the river that we could take advantage of and create a kind of open space, but only if it's contiguous, right? It's not, right?
It's
The park-
not. The park is clear over on another road. It's on Lake Shore, which is
Okay,
over quite a ways.
Would it be helpful for me to send you a map that has?
yeah, I went
You see
on
the-
I went online to look at it, but it was a little harder for me to,
Yeah, I can send you a map.
okay.
Right, any other questions for Tara?
I did.
Counselor Whipple?
So I saw that there was going to be the easement reserve, that 40-foot area that was just designated for utilities. Do we also want to have that easement be for trail or river access? Do we need to do that?
I don't think we need to, but we can certainly add it. The main reason we had this on there was for maintenance of the river so that we could bring our equipment in there if we needed to.
Okay,
But there's a trail that attaches to nothing.
right. But as we've been looking at different developments along the river, something that we've been talking about for the last couple of years is to have some sort of trail or river access, whichever side of the river it's on.
Yeah.
And so I want to be sure that that would be here. The other question I have is with the development of the rest of the property that they want to adjoin this to, by having this as their open space, how will that affect what their layout looks like? Will they not have to have as much open space in the rest of it because they're able to concentrate it here?
I'm assuming that they can. I don't know, Bill, if you're familiar with the River Bend project.
I mean, I don't think this impacts their design. I mean, they're already.
You know exactly.
Okay, I was just curious. All right, well then I just want to go along with Craig's notion that we keep this
That's not quite
preserved
notion,
as,
just notion.
as an open space. Thanks.
And there is no trail, so yeah, Becky was just showing me the map a little more clearly so I could see it. So there's no trail from the new park that goes along the south side of that river.
You know, it's on the north side.
It's all on the north. Okay. I mean, I guess I'm just sort of in favor of exploiting as much of the river as we can for, public access.
Is that what this is? Isn't this the trail?
That's
Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying on the south side of the river going up.
Well, until the
other
rest of that
side.
land is developed.
Cause the park is on that side.
It's on the north side.
That's right.
But when they did this before council and it got the zone changed, didn't they have river amenities? Am I thinking of the right one?
I'm remembering one that we did require river amenities, but I don't know if it's this one. Do you know, Tara?
No, that one was on
Bill's starting-
Geneva.
I'm not familiar with
That one was on Geneva. Or Center
No,
Street,
there
it was on
one-
Center Street.
There was one.
No,
near
there
this
was one
area.
that was where.
Yes, there was one that involved this piece and the piece
I'm remembering river amenities for this parcel.
Yes, there was a plan, there was an industrial rezone that included this, the piece south of this parcel and the parcel to the west. And there were a lot of commitments made about a river trail that would be privately owned privately owned and maintained, but the public would have access to that. It looks like that plan and the purchase of that property has fallen away. The property is now back on the market, but that's what you remember.
Yeah. Well,
Right, anything else for Tara? Right, thanks, Tara. I know you're the next one too, huh? Number 2, a discussion regarding resolution to place 0.375 acre parcel of ground located at 1992 North Geneva Road on the surplus property list and authorizing the mayor to dispose of the property, also presented by Tara Riddle.
So that looks really big. Okay, so this property is located on 2000 North and Geneva Road on the southeast side of the road. So the city acquired this property back in 2015. At the time, it had a house located on it and we were actually renting the house out. A little bit of time went by and we found that the maintenance on the home was going to make it almost impossible to continue renting it out. So we ended up demolishing it. So the property's been sitting there vacant since probably 2017, 2018. It's become a little bit of a burden for the city to actually manage this property and keep the weeds down. So we've been looking at surplusing the property, but in a productive way that we can actually hopefully meet one of the council's goals in providing some affordable housing. So it's proposed that we're looking at this property to partner with the Critical Housing Authority to develop it into some affordable townhomes. So the property is just under 0.4 of an acre. Just like the other property, we've done a departmental review and there's no future use that we've identified. There was a small portion of the property on the northwest corner of it that we've deeded over to the Utah Department of Transportation for the traffic signal that's there. Plus, we've taken out any of the property that we may need for the expansion of 2000 North. So the property was originally acquired for $210,000. So what we're proposing is to sell it to the housing authority for the amount that we paid for it. So instead of getting current market value, that's part of our contribution that we as a city would be making towards the affordable housing.
Well, you're not directly selling it to the housing authority, aren't you selling it to, is an RDA?
So what we're
Fine.
planning on doing is selling it directly to the housing authority, but the RDA will be giving them the money to purchase it from us. We're taking out the middleman. Originally, we were looking at deeding it to the RDA and then they would deed it over to the housing authority. But we found that we can actually remove that step and just have them provide the funding. I think Bill may have a comment.
The RDA has the funds that they need to put towards affordable housing, so this allows us to use some money that's intended for that use in the right way.
So that's the proposal. I don't know if there's any questions.
Okay, yeah, I
Any
love this.
concern?
Anyone have a question about it?
I do.
Councilor Rachel Whipple.
Okay, so I am so delighted about this project. I had a question about the price. So the original acquisition was 210. Did that include the area that's still being kept out for the easement and everything? What I'm wondering is this is a smaller amount. And so is the 210 actually right once we have those wide easements and it's not 0.5 acres, it's 0.37 something?
So we could discount the price if we wanted to. How I was looking at it is just making the city whole as far as the full price that we paid for it. And because it would be more money now because we purchased it back in.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering how those different factors work together, because I know we can't just give it away.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Oh,
in this particular case, we actually can.
we can.
Contrary to the standard principle of not being able to give taxpayers anyway, you can actually do that for certain, because of the for RDA things and for certain RDA things and certain affordable housing things. There's actually state law authorized.
Are those the only two exceptions?
I'd have to look at the notes, but I think that's right. I think it's RDA project areas and it's not even like all affordable housing. It's some very specific criteria. But my recollection from the email thread is that Adam Long, the RDA attorney, opined this met the criteria for one of the ones that is possible. That's one of the reasons why we decided to take out the middleman and transfer it directly because of meeting the statutory criteria.
Counselor Craig Christensen.
Was there a reason that we would not just transfer for free then? I mean, if we're trying to help with affordable housing,
That's just a policy question as Tara mentioned before, she's just recovering the purchase price the city's whole. But
and RDA has funds they need to allocate anyway.
that's up to you.
Yeah, he's right, where the RDA has funds they have to allocate, it would be good. But we're looking at this for housing for city workers and things like that, right?
Yes, it's for
Yes.
workforce housing. Yeah.
What are the funds that RDA has that have to be spent for these?
It's
ARPA
money,
funds or
it's money that came from the mix. I can't remember the total amount, but it should be
Right,
well in excess of the 210. But if the city would gift it, that's just another 210 that RDA has to use on another project to encourage affordable housing. It's not like we're up against the deadline that we have to hurry and spend the money.
Got it.
anytime
Yeah,
soon.
right. I remember that one. That's a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, so if we don't spend it now, we're actually saving that money for other worthy projects. That would be one argument for not spending, yes.
I think the only thing to consider is that the money that was used to originally purchase this came out of Public Works. And so it'd be that money that would then be
Reimbursing.
reimbursing.
What's that?
Okay, are there any other questions? So just like the other property, we'd like to have this heard during your August 6th meeting for the surplusing.
Yeah, I'd like to think through the implications of the 210 and whether to do that or not, or if maybe we could invest that money into this property in another way to reduce the cost of the housing a little bit more. I didn't realize that we had more options on that. I don't want to hurt the city.
That's not a bad idea because the biggest liability with this property is that the closest sewer is 400 feet or so to the east. And connecting to that's gonna have some expense. If that sewer is not deep enough and we have to go down Geneva Road, the next manhole is about that same distance, but going down Geneva Road is even more expensive because it's a state road. So that actually could come in really handy because right now that's the biggest development obstacle on this piece. It's getting the property to a sewer manhole.
Well, and normally the developer has to pay those those.
Exactly.
So what if we gave the money to Provo Housing Authority to use
Well,
towards?
and
the-
it may not even be that exact amount, right? We could just find out what it is to make that sewer connection. Okay,
And reduce it.
yeah, so I think we do want a little bit more information. I don't know at which point in time we would get that information, but maybe if we know what the different scenarios are, what the possible consequences are, like, will the city or Public Works be mad at us if we don't pay them back for this property? Because
They
we,
anticipate the reimbursement and we already have a project lined up.
exactly, so we need to know the possible implications of if we follow a slightly different course here.
And how much that sewer connection is, because we could even give the money to Public Works, but agree that they do the sewer connection, maybe they'll have extra money left over, I don't know. Counselor Craig Christensen.
And are there any preliminary plans in terms of what this would look like and how many homes we looking at, or townhomes or condos, or?
We're working on those plans right now and it won't be more than 6. 6 would be the maximum. We're hoping to get 6 on there.
Bill, I'm just thinking, based on the discussion, that we might want to ask Adam for a little bit more formal of an opinion, because my recollection from the email was he was kind of making an aside comment that wasn't about what he was actually asked. So since we're contemplating maybe changing the scenario, we probably ought to ask him for a formal opinion on the new scenario. make sure, just to cover our bases.
I'd be happy to do that. And while waiting for that response to come back from Adam, I'll follow up with Court 8 about where the 210 came from out of Public Works and if they were anticipating that coming back.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, because there are always consequences to our decisions and we don't anticipate all of them. And I really love this idea and I would love to know if there are other little parcels we've got through the city that we could develop in a similar way. And so I want to be really conscious about how we follow this process, especially with this first piece that we're doing, so that we can establish kind of a good pattern and we could be effective going forward. But if we bungle this in some way, then that will make it harder for us to use this as a tool to accomplish our goal of homeownership and housing in the city.
In terms of land development or home building, this is as simple as it gets. If we bungle this, we should stop trying.
Okay, thanks, Tara. And Tara, do you just want to communicate with us through email and keep updated on this? Because we still want you to get to your regular meeting time in August. All right, next item, a discussion regarding an ordinance to amend the Critical Hillside overlay zone. This is a citywide application presented by Aaron Ardmore, our planning supervisor.
Thank you, Council. So you hopefully all were anticipating this one coming to you. After last month's decision on Buckley Draw, there was issues found with the Critical Hillside overlay that kind of impacted the decision whether to stay in the overlay zone or remove themselves out of it. And I think the overriding decision was, you know, they're getting, the city's getting a lot of having it be in that Critical Hillside overlay. But for properties like this, where there isn't really a lot of hazard or issues, like a lot of hillside properties, providing some discretion in the code. So we can handle this one and maybe any others that are in similar situations in the future. So we drafted some language. We took it to Planning Commission. Planning Commission discussion was really helpful. They helped us be better at writing code. So what you see on the screen there is just a kind of overview of the Buckley Draw property and then the initial proposal that staff had. The Planning Commission helped to kind of evolve it into this, where it creates a separate subsection. Provo Legal also was very helpful in getting the wordsmithing correct, to indicate what properties that staff could deviate certain sections of the overlay zone regulations. So you see those in I through V there. So hopefully you've had time to look at this. If you have any questions, I can try to address those now or later tonight. I think it's on your night meeting tonight.
Any questions for Aaron on this? I think it looks good, Aaron. Counselor Becky Bogdan.
Brian, you're
Yes.
okay with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was quite a process because staff went through it and Planning Commission suggested some language. Planning Commission followed up on their language, but then I went through and I had sorry for the humorous anecdote, probably only humorous to me, but I had a funny conversation with Bill last week where I called him to ask him what was going on with some of the different versions I said, and he said, well, one of our planning commissioners suggested some alternate language, and I said, well, that's awesome because I just spent the last half hour rewriting it and came up with almost exactly the same thing that he had that he had suggested. So I just tweaked a couple words and it's good.
Right, any other questions for Aaron? All right, looks good, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, a discussion regarding resolution approving the appropriation of $383,000 in the Rental Office Rehab Fund for an affordable senior housing project. This is presented by Melissa McNally.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Councilor McKay stated, I'm here to ask for an appropriation of $383,000 in the rental rehab fund previously fund 272. This fund was initially set up in the early 2000s as an EDI grant from HUD that was used for rental rehab, and loans were made, and as that money came in, it's just been sitting in that fund. I'm asking because of a contract that we have with NeighborWorks Mountain Country Home Solutions. They are doing a senior rental housing project in Orem. They were committed home funds in 2020, and then again in the 23-24 year. And as I was reviewing contracts, I realized that we have overcommitted our home funding. HUD only allows like a certain subsidy amount per unit in their housing, and so we have overcommitted. And to make up for that shortfall and ensure that the project moves forward, I am asking for the appropriation. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Melissa?
I have
Councilor
questions.
Whipple.
So this means that we're pulling out of a different pot, but that we'll have this money back in our HUD funds then that we could use?
Yes, yes.
Okay. This rental rehab fund, how long has that been sitting fallow, and how much is in there?
So there was about $1 million. We did appropriate some funding to cover some staff salary costs and a housing study cost at the end of last year. So between those two things is about 800,000 right now. And it's been sitting there. Well, it's been sitting there collecting funding since about 2025 or 2005, 2006, for so close to 20 years. The initial funding that went out was in the form of loans, so that money has been paid back into that. This appropriation that I'm asking for would also be in the form of a loan, so it would come back to that fund eventually.
So this was like a revolving fund where we would let it out to do this rehabilitation, it would come back.
Yes, we just haven't lent anything out for several years.
Why is that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Huh. I would love to be able to use this in a more robust way. So this seems like a good start to look at this fund again and help. Do you have a sense of what you want to use the HUD funds for that will be freed up by this loan?
That's a great question. And that's certainly up to the council's discretion. It would be great if we could put some more of that in. We're looking at changing some of our down payment assistance programs to provide more funding for homeownership. Just off the top of my head, I think that would be probably the quickest use of that funding. Beyond that, I'm not sure. But those are discussions that that I certainly look forward to having with council.
Okay, thank you. That would be great. I really worry with some of these things that the requirements to participate in the program and the market create circles that do not overlap at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so wherever we can find those overlaps, I want to exploit that as much as possible to help our people.
Great.
Councilor Christensen.
Yeah, I would add my voice to that as well. Love to see this used as soon as possible. And I just wanted to double check. So the 383 is a loan for how long? Just like a calendar cycle or a budget cycle, or?
No, it would be a loan for several years. I would probably shape it in the same way we do our current home loans that we make, because as when we give to developers, it is in the form of a loan. So that's typically paid back anywhere. I think the loans with NeighborWorks have been around 15 to 20 years. So it would be similar.
15 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very long loan.
It is, yeah.
And if we didn't do this, what happens?
They would struggle to complete the project. It would definitely extend that, the project completion. Right now, they're looking at it being, the construction finished and, leased out through, by the end of this year. If they didn't have this funding, that would definitely extend that out. I'm not sure how long, but they wouldn't meet the end of the year deadline.
It feels more like a donation than a loan. Yeah, that kind of time horizon, I had no idea that it was that long.
Which is probably why nothing's been done with that other money, when it's coming
Yeah.
in over 15, 20 years.
So, I mean, is this, again, I'm sorry, I don't understand how all of this works. Is this a series of loans that get paid? So is this just one of many that get paid back 10, 15 years later?
It is with the developer, because the home funds that are in the project now are in the form of a loan. And that comes back, and we reuse that for affordable housing projects. So this would come back in 15 to 20 years. We could require that it's paid, sooner than that, and have them pay off that loan before, as they start paying back, we can have the funding go towards that loan as opposed to the other ones.
And is this a general fund allocation? Where does
It is
this come?
No, it's coming from the Rental Rehab Fund, which is probably where like as Rachel found out, that's 20-year-old fund. That's probably been sitting like that because the same thing, it's money that keeps getting loaned and then paid back over 15, 20 years. So it is a fund that is slow and, has. Counselor Garrett.
What's the interest rate based on, Melissa? Is it a bond rate or the current mortgage rate?
No, it's not either of those things, because we do really low interest, so that we can ensure affordable housing for these projects. It's typically been about between 1% and 2%.
I mean, to do affordable housing, I think it takes stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Because there's nothing affordable naturally. It has to be subsidized.
Right.
These aren't in Provo though.
No, they're in Orem.
Now, do they come, now, I thought this was HUD money, part of that we got from the government that's used for this whole area, but is the rental rehab fund money Provo money? Is that just our money?
It's not, in the past it was used in Provo, it's not, it doesn't have like the constraints that it has to stay in Provo. We can use it other places if we would like, or we can keep it in Provo.
But where did the money come from originally?
It came from HUD, it was a one-time.
Okay, so it is federal
It
money.
was a one-time federal, amount.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Melissa? All right, thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
All right, next discussion regarding code cleanup language to address recreational vehicles, trailers, and vehicles. Presented by Michael Sanders, our policy analyst.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about trailers. Cool. Okay, so in July of last year, the council approved an ordinance that enacted some new code for on-street parking of recreational vehicles, boats, and trailers. So whenever I say the word trailers, just know that I mean recreational vehicles, boats, and trailers. It's just a short phrase for it. So we had an issue tracker request came in where a couple of councilors discovered a code conflict between 9.31.050 and 9.31.055. And we also had an additional policy question about the treatment of vehicles and recreational vehicles and trailers. So we'll just go over both of those. So first, the conflict in 0.050 that requires trailers to move 400 feet every 72 hours. But in the new code that was enacted last year, it says that trailers you need to move to an entirely different block face every 72 hours. So as you can see, the conflict is one section requires the trailers to move 400 feet, while the new one requires it to move to a completely different block face. So to solve this conflict, we just recommend this following cleanup language here to just clear up this inconsistency and require trailers to move to a different block face rather than the 400 feet. So now just the policy question between the treatment of vehicles and trailers. So after talking with parking enforcement, we learned that the reason for that new regulation 0.055 was because there was a trend developing of trailers being stored long-term on the street and kind of overtaking and using up a lot of street parking, and just the requirement to make them move 400 feet wasn't enough. So that prompted the regulation that was passed by the council last July that required the trailers to move to a different block face, just rather than just the 400 feet. So the parking division recommends that we just maintain the status quo and require trailers to move to a different block face rather than just to move 400 feet. As staff, we just looked into some other high population cities in Utah just to see what their parking regulations were or the treatment, how they treated vehicles and trailers, and all this was just included in your packet. But if you guys have any questions about these other cities, we can go over that now.
I think this is an easy one.
All
Like
right.
we did the last one in July purposely to clean this up.
All right, so we're just looking for a motion on either to continue research or proceed with one of the policy options.
Okay, I'd make a motion that we just maintain the status quo as recommended by our parking enforcement and in our last policy done in July to clean up that language.
I'd second that.
Option one.
I'd second that, for option one.
All right, any discussion on the issue? All right, we'll take a vote. Counselor Gary Good,
Yes.
Counselor Becky Bogdan,
Yes.
Counselor George Hanlon,
Yes.
Counselor Teresa McKay, yes, Counselor Rachel Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Craig Christensen.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay, we'll bring the language back in August.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for coming. If anyone has questions for parking, they are here. Okay, discussion regarding ordinance to address parking in front of mailboxes. This will be presented by David Pyle. He is our council intern.
Afternoon, councilors. This is meant to be a mostly preliminary discussion to see if this is something that the council is interested in pursuing further. So I'm gonna make this really short and sweet, and I'll take you through some of the information we found in our research and then what it's gonna take for the council to have a real effect. So many of you probably know already that the city has gotten a lot of complaints about cars parked in front of their mailboxes. USPS policy is to not deliver mail to obstructed mailboxes. So what's happening here is that residents are not having their mail delivered to them because there are strangers parked in front of their houses. And most of the complaints that we've been getting have been concentrated in the neighborhoods around the Timview High School area.
Troublemakers.
So what USPS needs is enough clearance around mailboxes for their trucks to pull in, deliver their mail, and then pull out without the driver having to leave the vehicle. So we contacted USPS and asked if they had a standard on this, and the response was that they recommended 10 to 15 feet on either side of the mailbox. So we're talking 20 to 30-foot gaps between mailboxes. And this is already being done in a lot of other cities. And it varies city by city, but you kind of see a common theme here. Most choose either 10 or 15 feet. Some have hours in which it's in force, some are 24/7. And it's pretty much the same story wherever you go. So if the council chose to pursue this, there would be probably two options. The first is a citywide 24/7 ban on parking inside of mail, around mailboxes. And again, anything less than 10 feet is unlikely to have any real effect. So 10 feet would be the absolute minimum that we would recommend going. The other would be to do the same thing, but to have certain hours in which it's enforced. For example, Monday through Friday, 7 AM to 5 PM. That way, we're still leaving residents room to park on the streets overnight, but we're keeping them clear during the day, in the most sort of time to complete the routes. And if there are any questions, we'll have you answer.
Okay, I have a couple questions on this.
Yes.
And this, I don't know if this is a question for Bowden, because I'm wondering if this is a kind of thing that we enforce proactively, or if you just do it on complaints. Are there things that we enforce just on complaints versus proactively in parking enforcement?
Not necessarily just on complaint based, enforcement. I mean, I have officers out all day, every day. And so as far as blocked, mailboxes come about, it's common, but not as common as you would think. If I were to recommend a suggestion, it would be based on the time frame of during business hours of operating for the mail carrier. That would be my recommendation. If we do a completely ban, you're removing a tremendous amount of on-street parking, and that's we already know that is a concern as it is. So that would be a recommendation that I would have is during those business hours if we do choose a question.
Really quick, on the same lines, like, I think this is something that's an issue. Obviously, we know Tim Hughes created such an issue with this because it's every day and people are going days without getting their mail because it is so long-standing during school. I mean, it's not an issue right now, right? Just when school's in. And I think that's probably what usually is the issue. Like, I know in my area, when construction's going on, people get frustrated. The same construction vehicles that are working on a home block it again for days and they don't get the mail for days. Like, the odd day doesn't seem to irk people. But when you have projects or construction or things going on where suddenly cars are on the road 24/7 for days, not 24/7, but during those main business hours for days is where the issue becomes. Is it possible to do legislation like this where it is by complaint? Or is that not a thing?
Great question. I would have to look into that. I mean, we'd want to be fair throughout the entire city. If we're just gonna enforce, like you say, around Timpview area, then, but.
No, it could be anywhere, but they complain, like whoever calls
based
in.
on complaint.
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe we could.
I don't know, Brian, is there a legal thing with that?
Say that again, with
The
the.
idea of doing this
Complaint-based.
particular enforcement, making it
No,
complaint
enforcement's
based.
discretionary, so as long as we have, I mean, consistency about how we apply the policies is the main issue, but if you want some things to be complaint based and some things to be proactive, that's fine.
So I look at this as one that's not a safety issue, right? We're not blocking a sidewalk or a line of sight per se. It's an annoyance issue. It's an inconvenience, especially when it happens days after days. I don't know, just.
I mean, it seems like, but to be fair, there might be people who don't know that they have access to complain about it,
complaining.
so, you know.
True.
It seems like we could leave it up to your discretion, but if if one of your people sees multiple offenders on the street, they can drop some warnings or whatever, so there's a little education, but if it's.
It would definitely start with education, right?
Yeah, 100%.
My other thing is I've received emails saying that people's mail's delivered till 6. They want the hour to 6, not 5. That's the other feedback. I've got,
And don't they deliver mail on Saturday?
they do it on Saturday and Sunday.
So why would we do Monday through Friday?
If I can speak to that, the time that was given in the presentation was just an example to show the points. The time frame that it would be given and would be up to the council.
Councilor Becky Bogdan,
So when is Timpview scheduled to be done? I mean,
2029.
really?
But the parking lot.
Not till
sooner, right?
2029. There'll be no parking till 2020. I was at the school board meeting.
That's a long time, so it's an issue that definitely needs some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Councilor Gary Garrett.
How do people know about this? We wouldn't be painting the curb red on 10 feet of either side of the mailbox or posting a
We
sign.
have to
How do
do,
people know
you have to
about
do
it?
education through our social media. We could do it through the utilities newsletter. And then they start out with warnings like they do with all changes.
Probably should go through the school newsletter as well.
Yeah.
If this is a Tim Few High School problem.
Offenders can learn about it very quickly.
I like the idea of a don't block the box education
Oh, that's
campaign.
good, that's good.
Right? Like, you're not supposed to park by a fire hydrant, and now we could tell people don't park by a mailbox, because that will be completely new to everyone.
Think outside the box, park outside the box.
See, George is jumping in on this one. But they're right, though. I mean, if they're squeezed on staff, a lot of times you'll have those newer mail post office people, they'll do 2 routes in one day, so you can get mail up to like even 7 o'clock sometimes, but even if you just cut it off at 6, I don't think that's gonna be an everyday thing. They're gonna get mail at 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Counselor Hanley.
I'll just express, yeah, my opinion. I definitely favor the hour format
For
rather
sure.
than the ban. I think the ban. Just don't like that word right now, so. I'd rather accommodate people's need for that parking on other occasions, so anyway, but I
Now-
think it's a good idea.
Speaking of bans, this will be very harsh on Slate Canyon. That's a thing.
Do they have
Really?
curbside mailboxes?
Have they had that problem of people not getting their mail though? Do you know?
I don't know if they did, but like there will be like essentially no parking during the day on Slate Canyon as well if we do this.
Oh, dear.
So that's because every house has a mailbox and there's on a street facing mailbox along.
But it
Slate
is
Canyon.
complaint based only, right? If we do it that way.
Well, we'd have to specify that, yeah.
Well, and are the mailboxes next to the driveway, so the driveway could count as part of that 10 feet that you need to access the mailbox?
Some are and some aren't. I went and like I walk and ride that every day, so I was like paying attention and took pictures, and some are close together. Like some houses have put them together and some have put them in the middle of their lawn and some are like right by the driveway, like it's varies house to house.
Lee, have you heard of anyone not getting their mail delivered because of parking?
I don't know,
It doesn't seem like it's been an issue where we would have heard.
That's not one
We
that
would
we've
have,
heard.
like, sort of-
That's not one we heard.
so. I don't know.
I think it'd be really hard too in cul-de-sacs. I'm getting messages from Karen. She loves the don't block the box thing, but yeah, in cul-de-sacs too, you'd have a hard time because there's hardly any parking there. And then if you've got boxes out there, that's your curves, stuff like that, it's gonna be really cutting on your parking.
Yeah, I'd be really loath to create additional problems on Slate Canyon. There's a way to be fair, and maybe complaint only is the
Way to go.
way to, and your discretion on that, but it seems to me that, you know, if we start slapping warnings or tickets up and down Slate Canyon during the day, they're gonna go bonkers, and I wouldn't blame them.
Counselor Craig Christensen.
But, and maybe this needs to be more, be remediated to the area that's really in question, which is Timpview. I mean, Timpview High School construction project is throwing everything off. I mean, could we do a topical solution for some period of time?
Oh, like a temporary
Yeah.
zone
Yeah.
for this?
Like a temporary zone.
Can we look into this, David and Brian, and
Yeah, those are options if you wanted that, I mean, similar to parking permit plans, right? If you wanna pass this, but only pass it for a certain geographical area and include a sunset provision that it, goes away in 2029, you can do that. Those are all options. One other thing I would mention, just to clarify, my previous comment is that while proactive versus complaint-based is an option, that's an administrative decision, but certainly the council could express their desires or input on that while they're passed, but that wouldn't be included in the legislation.
Now, in light of this, Craig, I did receive multiple emails from people not associated with Timpview who were like, about time. This has been an issue for years for us. So it isn't just Timpview construction.
I'm wondering if we need to look at some sort of design standard for new developments for where mailboxes are placed, so that we could avoid problems like this with future development.
They are gonna do mailboxes like this in new subdivisions, they're all mailboxes,
All
even percent single family subdivisions.
Okay, so this will not be a problem with anything in the future, only with existing houses.
Well, not totally true. I mean, if you redevelop a house that already has it, you're gonna get it again.
Right,
Or
but
if-
it's an existing one.
Well, but there's also empty lots that are doing the same thing. Like I have empty lots around me that are just 1, 2, 3 lots, and they have individual boxes.
Okay, but could we do a standard that if you do have one of those empty lots in an existing area, that you have to put your mailbox next to your driveway or something so that we could reduce? Because it seems like it would be in their interest, because then they could have some off-street or on-street parking.
As far as I know, where the mailbox is placed is up to the USPS.
No, it's not. It's up to the homeowner.
Well, I've heard people before, they've had to get permission from the post office to move their mailbox.
Yes, I've dealt with the post office where they insisted 2 mailboxes be next to each other, so they only need 1 stop for 2 boxes.
Oh, I just did it. They told me to put wherever I wanted.
Postmaster or maybe.
Yeah, that's, and I even checked into it because we've had one that's like right in the middle of the sidewalk and one that's on the curb. And this is they're, I even went with Public Works. It's 100% the post office that has the discretion of where those boxes go. Whether they're in the sidewalk or whether they're in the curb.
Okay.
But I would just say, I hear it most, obviously this is my district, so I hear a lot about this. I would like to see us do something. I worry about a Pan City and I would not take this to Slate Canyon. I would suggest we start with Timpview and give it a sunset after a couple of years or renew it after a couple of years if there's more construction going on. But that neighborhood needs some help.
And it's gonna extend out, right? You're talking about all the way up Timpview, all the way over to Canyon. Like it would be kind of the North Timp neighborhood,
Yes.
Edgemont neighborhood. Maybe do it by. Do you want to come back to us, David, with some more options considering these thoughts?
We can definitely do that, yep.
Another question on it that I
But-
had, do we want to bring this up in a District 1 meeting? So that they can discuss and maybe give some feedback of,
Yeah.
where they would like it. I mean, if they want the whole northeast section, then let the whole northeast section go, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Is Rachel listening in the universe?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
like
so let's bring this up in the Northeast Neighborhood Meeting, which is tomorrow. And let's consider clauses, Brian and David, where we can do a sunset or a certain area. Why don't we speak with the administration as far as if they're well, we need to consider both, I guess. Can we do complaint based or can we just do it all and then it's specific, if we're doing a specific area, we just do it all and not make it complaint based? I don't know. I think those are the thoughts that we've had. Anything I missed?
No, makes sense.
Okay. And I guess we bring this back in the next work meeting?
Thank you, Council.
Before school starts.
Yes,
Yeah.
before school starts. We have to get this.
We probably do.
Well, that's
Do we
getting
have another
close.
meeting before school starts?
August.
Yeah, August 6th.
One.
We probably need to communicate with the school board as well. We've got a month. See if they'll do some education.
All right, next a discussion regarding an ordinance to amend the Hillside and Critical and Canyons Plan to include a new appendix.
Okay. So way back in December of last year, the council approved the Hillsides and Canyons Plan. And direct the council staff to come back with proposed language stating the council's intent and desires with regards to city-owned properties that are outside of the Provo city boundaries, mostly in around Provo Canyon, and included as a new appendix of the plan. So this would be considered a general plan amendment and would require planning commission recommendation. So just today, what we're asking for is approval or feedback on the proposed language that was inside your packet. And it will then go to the planning commission for recommendation and then come back from them for a final vote. So just one comment I did receive via email after we sent this out was that there's a lack of a map showing the properties that are we are referencing. There is a link in there to the Utah County parcel map where you can search for city-owned properties. Just our hesitation with adding a map or a list of said properties in the actual appendix is due to the potential change that the city may sell or purchase more properties at some time. So if that occurred, we would have to come back and re-amend the map or list. But of course, that is just a policy decision of the city council. If you guys want to add a map or a list in some way, other than that, all the language was contained in your packets, and just looking for proposed changes or ideas or feedback or.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael?
So I was thinking about the map issue as well. And I would want it to have something like, you know, which at the time of the signing or on this date included these properties, acknowledging that the properties are subject to change, instead of just tying it to a map that is itself inherently variable. Yeah, I'd like to be able to say what it was when this was passed.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, part of the interest that I had, at least in having this appendix, is to create more awareness on the council and in the public of those properties specifically that are up in South Fork. And even as Malia was pulling this up, it's like 2 or 3 or 4 steps to get to it. And you got to kind of know what you're looking for to even see them. So it's actually, for sort of a general user, it's not the most intuitive thing to say, oh, okay, now I know what we're talking about. So I think it would be nice to have a list and a map, but if it has to be updated, then I guess that's not the most onerous of tasks, I guess, right? Or
I don't know, I don't work in GIS.
okay.
Councilor Craig Christensen.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd really like to see a map and a list and an as of date. It seems like if we had an as of date, you don't have to update it every month or just do an as of, because I think it's helpful to know specifically what we're talking about. And the iterations to finding it on the map, I don't think is acceptable.
Say that again, I missed that correctly. What's not acceptable?
To expect that people can find it by going to a link and knowing what to look for and things like that.
Well, I think the idea that Michael and I discussed, one of the things we were concerned about is having to amend the general plan every time the map changed, because this is an appendix to the general plan. But if you're okay with the idea of there being a link, this would be something we need to clear with the administration. If you're okay with the idea of the document itself just containing a link and GIS maintaining a separate map that the link goes to outside of the document, that prevents, then that map can be updated by them. My concern was about every time they make a change to the map, if there's a map like physically in the appendix, then every time it changes, you've got to go through the entire process of amending the general plan.
Yeah, if the link said, if that last sentence of the first paragraph said a map of these and other city-owned properties can be found at the Provo City parcels outside of Provo city boundaries map or something. That's a mouthful. but
Right,
You
and
get
they
my
can come
point.
up, they can come
And
up.
and you click on that and it goes right to those properties.
We would need to verify that with GIS, but I'm assuming that would be okay, because there are other maps that we already do.
That map already exists.
Yeah.
So
But that way you avoid the problem of having to amend the
Right.
general plan. Yeah, that seems like an easy, I don't know, seems like an adequate solution to me, but.
I like that idea. But other than the map issue, is there any other proposed changes or grammatical fixes to the actual language of the document itself?
Anything else for Michael? Okay, no, thanks, Michael.
Well, sorry, I had
Counselor Hammond.
one additional question. I guess, and I probably should have brought this up earlier when I was thinking about this with you, Michael, but that number one, conservation of environmentally sensitive areas, most of these properties are springs. I'm just sort of asking the open-ended question. I'm assuming that prioritize the preservation and restoration of natural habitats, landforms, and ecological features. Is that adequate language enough to say protect these watersheds, or would we want something even more specific about? And I don't actually know if all of them are springs, but it seems like
Well,
the
and George,
majority of them.
I think part of it is these are resources that we want to have developed that we can use. So it's not about restoration and protection. It's about having a water resource. Because when they put in the new facility at Big Springs, they destroyed a beautiful little spring ecology system right there in order to more fully get that water source. So I think while I like this language, it is probably not what Public Works would appreciate, because it might restrict their ability to use the resources that we have there that we need for our city for some of these properties.
This document was sent to Public Works.
Are they okay?
I received no response back.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they liked it, though.
So
So we do need, I don't know how hard we push them for feedback when we give them something that affects their properties and ask for it and they're quiet.
But either way, if the council does like this language, it will go through the planning commission process, which does include Public Works.
Okay.
Well, yeah, maybe we leave it as is for now, and then, we keep that in mind, and if you want to continue to try to draw that to their attention, maybe we could get their feedback on that.
Yeah, but I think it may be possible that we add a fourth point that says, development of natural resources for the city.
Yeah, I mean, it may be under number 3 too, mitigation of hazards, protect against natural hazards as well as, water pollution or something. I don't, I maybe just ask them, especially with regard to those springs, if they want different language there.
If they need to develop infrastructure for you to utilize the springs.
We're discussing the water plan, right, later on today. Maybe this should be a part of that conversation when we have Gary and everybody here.
Has Gary seen this?
He was included.
He was included on that email. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Is that it?
Can I just ask what exactly was the direction?
I was not giving any specific
Okay, so just
direction
forward
at
it
this
to the
point.
planning commission as is and continue to.
Well, I guess
No.
if there was direction, at least that I was thinking of, is you could just keep knocking on that door to make sure that they are looking at that language, and so you could let them know that we had that this discussion and we want to make sure that they feel like it's adequate.
Or the idea that they might need a fourth bullet point for Public Works in possible infrastructure needs to utilize the water sources for the city, if that's a thing or not, if that's a concern.
I think if we do a fourth bullet point, we could probably circulate that through email and then let it go on to the planning commission through it. But a fourth bullet point would be something along the lines of developing natural resources for the city to use. Because not all of these 3 or 4 points would apply to every property. But we would want them to be considered, that's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, I would just, okay, I mean, maybe we'll get, when we get to that point where we're wordsmithing, I would make sure it's not just development, but protection of, because I mean, if you have neighboring pollution issues that get into the water stream, then we're in trouble and we've lost a water resource. So, I mean, we certainly want to be able to use those resources, but we want to protect them from contaminations. So.
Chair McKay, I get the sense on this particular one, I think a motion would actually be helpful, because, you know, this is in response to a previous motion that staff come back with language. I think staff needs to know what to do with the language. So I think either a motion to send it on to Planning Commission as it is, and to take, and recognizing that there's going to be city feedback during the Planning Commission process, and you can take that into consideration when you get the Planning Commission recommendation, or if there's something you want staff to do before it goes to Planning Commission, I think that should be specific.
So I'll make a motion that we request staff to craft a 4th item here. It's not a bullet, it's a number. So number 4, which would address the health and access and use of water resources in these lands. And you could consult with Public Works to get some of that language drafted, and then we could do that by email.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Counselor Buchan?
Gordon, where you just came in, do you have any feedback with this? We're looking at some of this is springs and stuff, and we want to know if I don't know, Rachel can explain it better. If any of this would restrict us being able to utilize those springs, I guess that's the concern, right? Am I getting that right?
So you're looking for language to help protect the springs up in the hillside. That's what you're asking about. And
Well, the idea too, that you would, not about protecting them, like sometimes you might have to build infrastructure to utilize them.
right. So I think there should be language anywhere that if there is a need for a piece of public infrastructure that services, you know, for example, it's not just us, but sometimes there's value in, you know, we saw the Prestar gas line or Dominion Energy gas line go in, or other kinds of things that happen that need to take place for public infrastructure. So I think public infrastructure should be allowed in most any zone, subject to making sure it doesn't wipe out trees, and we replant things, we make things look good again. But whether it's power lines or water infrastructure, other kinds of things, that if we have to go up and prepare things for fire breaks or for you know, debris flows or basins, those kind of things should be allowed along the hillside that we might be incidental or not aware of today, but is due to we have a fire up there, and now we need to go up there and protect for 5 years before vegetation grows in. We don't want to have restriction in ordinances that would prohibit that, or we have to come in and do something. We want to be able to do incidental infrastructure that may be necessary. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I guess the issue is whether you think this language, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it.
I saw this like when
Okay.
it first came out, but I didn't.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't.
mean, the issue is whether or not Public Works is comfortable that this language is not restricting you in this way,
And if you want to add a 4th.
or if you want to add anything. Or do you want more time?
When I read this, it didn't bother me with any of these things. I think if we're planning a long-term piece of infrastructure, like something in a spring, we would go through a long planning process, and we would probably go through a city council or planning commission kind of approval. If we're doing an emergency aspect of something, then we're allowed to just go do that if we think there's imminent danger to life of the property. And I haven't thought about a zoning requirement to accomplish those tasks. So maybe I do need to think about it a little more intently.
Okay.
And so sending it back, I'm going to reread it with intent, not reread it just to read it. So, all right.
And I think George's motion still accomplishes that. It allows for a fourth point that is
If you wanna
reviewed
add
ultimately
anything.
by
Okay,
them.
we'll take a good look at it and take it seriously to see what we may want to do and what we need to have available to make it work effectively with that.
Thanks, Gordon. All right, so take a vote on the motion. Becky Bogdan,
Yes.
Counselor Handley,
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes, Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Christensen,
Yes.
and Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
All right, so that passed unanimously, so we'll just work ahead on that. And then it won't come to us again. We could do it through email before it
Yeah,
goes
through
to planning commission.
email, and then through email, and then it will be a while before it comes back because of the planning commission process.
Great. We are running ahead. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back at 1:30.
All right. Here. Very.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Thank you. When the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints started rebuilding the new Provo temple, one of the requests they had was to abandon Temple Hill Road. And I think there was some slides on me. Did I give you a slideshow? Okay, well, I'll describe it to you. There's a road that they wanted to abandon, and we agreed. We did traffic study. It was averaging about 10 trips a day, and so it was just not meaningful. And there was a portion, the way the state law reads is when you abandon a road, the road goes to the owners that are adjacent to that property, and the property is split. But there was a section of the road that came to the city of Provo. And so the city council agreed to sell that section to the Temple Group so that they could build it into the whole parking lot. And they, at the time, Public Works was negotiating with the MTC group to get some addition, just do a property swap as opposed to get the cash, because we needed extra property around the water tanks for the future construction of those. But due to some difficulties in working through that and the timing, we needed to they need to move forward quicker. So we sold them the property, we received the money. And so we've continued to negotiate with the MTC, and we've come to an agreement to buy the property that we need for the additional right of way. And so this $175,000 was not appropriated in the budget. It wasn't accounted for anywhere. And so what we're looking to do, I've spent time talking to John Borgett, is to allocate allocate those funds for two things. One is to buy the property at around the water tanks from the MTC. The cost of the property purchase is about $125,000. That relieves about another $50,000. What we're doing right now is we are working with the Quail Valley HOA to bring in their infrastructure into the city, and they've agreed to upgrade their system. They're doing about $500,000 of improvements to their system. But there's some things that we'd like to see improved that aren't necessarily in the contract for them to do to bring that into the system so it's fully upgraded. So we'd like to use the other $50,000 to do some improvements to their system. And so this is something we'd like to bring to the city council for a budget amendment in the first meeting in August. So that was my explanation. Are there any questions?
Okay, any questions for Gordon? Counselor Gary Garrett.
Relative to the 125, Gordon, for the land around the water tanks, could you give a little more explanation of that? How much more room does that give you? And
Yeah, so I have a really great maps on my computer that just illustrates excellently. What it does is our tanks actually are physically right up. We might have the PowerPoint here.
Oh, Jim's got maps.
I was gonna have to use 1,000 words to describe this to you. It's just gonna take forever. So
one photo.
I was gonna run out about 500 and still not do a very good job. Yeah, right. I'll make sure we have our slides there. City council meeting.
Yeah, just to understand better what impact that will have on your ability to serve.
I think this visual, you'll see that when you do a construction site of a water tank, you need a gap. You can't be right at the property line. If you're right at the property line, you're gonna go over anyway. You need to buy a construction easement and you're gonna carry it out anyway. So if we can cap it within the fence, it would be a really good opportunity.
But it took this extra time to negotiate with the church relative to the use of that space.
Yeah. It's actually controlled by BYU Church as opposed to Temple Church.
Okay.
That's good. Wait, there's not. Oh, there, okay, so if you can see the water tanks,
Mhm.
what you can see is the red is what we'll be purchasing, so it just makes a nice smooth where this kind of jog in. We're gonna be putting two much larger tanks into here, and so in order to get the additional area we need when we replace those tanks, looking at design, this really makes a huge difference in us being able to fill those tanks in much. If you put too many restrictions on your contractor, make it too tight of a construction area, your costs are gonna go up. So if you do the right amount of distance, they can work around the system, then it's going to be a better, less expensive project, more.
Does the city own everything up into the?
This direction.
Okay.
This is the MTC. And that's the church.
And the other space around it doesn't give them enough room to do what they need to do?
You're talking about all the
Yes,
space over here.
yeah.
So there's a huge amount of staging that needs to go on for this site. So when we started looking at it and where you start pushing to build the future tanks while because again, you gotta leave the people in Provo with water while we replace and tear down and put in the new tank. So if we start looking at the construction staging, this right away really makes a big difference. It's not a lot, but it ends up really making it a much easier project for us to manage. And we're basically giving up right away to get right away. I think that's a good philosophical use of funding, is to use one-time funds for one-time purposes and one-time improvements to infrastructure.
It remains open space. It's not
yeah,
fenced off
You're not gonna see us do any physical improvements. This is just gonna be that way.
until construction time.
Yeah, we're likely a decade plus before we're gonna be in there. I'm looking at Gary, maybe he's just frowning at me. He's not gonna give me a number, so. I'm on the record. I'm saying a decade on the record, but it could be off by 10 years.
Okay.
Off by 10 years, meaning it could be tomorrow.
It won't go that way. It'll be the other direction, so.
All right, any other questions for Gordon? Well, that was easy. Thanks, Gordon. All right. We could take another break if we wanted. Let's just go into our next long one on water, and then we'll take a break before our closed session. So Gordon, this is you again with a discussion regarding a resolution to adopt the proposed Provo City Water Master Plan.
Our consultant is 30 minutes out. We didn't tell them how efficient you were. So they didn't know that, so. We
could
can
take a
start
break.
this.
Yeah, we'll take a break. You tell us when they're here.
That'd be great. We'll tell them the speed, get the police out of the way. So you can-
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, so this next item of business is discussing a resolution to adopt the proposed water city or Provo City Water Master Plan. And it will be presented by Gordon Hayter, our own Public Works Director, and Keith Larson from Bone Collins and Associates.
Well, we appreciate being able to come before the city council in this work session, talk about the water master plan. And I just want to say how impressed I am with the council reading document, studying it, having thoughtful comments. And then I want to apologize about something. Becky had sent out some very detailed questions. I guess I should say Councilman Logan sent out some very detailed questions. They came to us a week or so ago, and Gary and his team answered them, put together a lot of thought, sent it to me to review. I did and deleted it. And then Becky said, "How come you didn't send me these answers?" And I said, "Oh, Gary did." He said, "No," because in the title it said, "Read them and then send them on." And I didn't read the send on part. So I just sent them to Justin, and he has forwarded them to you. So 5 days, 5 minutes, it's about the same thing. So in the scale of geological time, really, it's not much different. So I apologize for getting those back to you a little late. However, like I said, I'm very pleased that there's been so much effort by the council to read this document and try to really understand it. And I think, to me, it's really important to understand the infrastructure of the city. It's great to have a general plan of all the things you want to do, what we want to accomplish, and all the goals that are there. But this plan helps us achieve those by making sure that the water is available for the future. And there's been a lot of very progressive, forward-looking ideas to make sure that we achieve these things. And so I believe this plan helps encompass all the things we need to do. So that's kind of my introduction to this topic. We're going to have Keith go through the PowerPoint. It's only about, I think it's less than a dozen slides, or 15, less than 20. Less than 20. Anyway, so it goes really quickly, so there'll be a lot of time to answer questions, talk about specific things that the council wants. Gary's also going to be talking about a few of the specifics that give you kind of a hands-on feel for what's going on in the city.
Well, I know you're getting a little sick and tired of listening to me, so I planned to bring my colleague Andy Harris, and she got double booked, so we had to divide, and you're stuck with me again. But we'll talk about a few things here and hopefully answer some questions along the way. I think you saw this slide a year or so ago, just talking about all the different components of the planning that are in the works. We've spent a lot of time talking about revenue needs and tiered rates, and the goal was to back up and today just to talk about the actual planning document. So that's what we're doing today. One important thing to talk about is what projected growth is contemplated in this plan. And so over on the side, you can see that there is a significant amount of projected growth that is included in this plan. This includes the city's current general plan, the neighborhood plans that have been adopted by the council, and then also some additional density increases that have been essentially mandated by the state in association with transportation corridors. The current number shows the city reaching a build-out population of potentially as high as 217,000 people if all those areas were to develop. There's also some projections in terms of employment, which factors into commercial demands in the city. The map just indicates those areas that were included with additional densification identified with from your planning documents and specific neighborhood plans. Okay, so, I should have gone to this slide, that was just summarizing what was included. The 2023 general plan, including specific state mandates. The water master plan incorporates all adopted and mandated densities. It does not include unadopted potential neighborhood plans such as the northeast and mall area. So those would be in addition to or slightly different than what is contemplated here. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of projected water use? You are currently using about 30,000 acre feet of water. That's the volume of water required to cover 1 acre by a foot of water. 30,000 acre feet is where you're at, and you have been there for the last almost 15 years or so. That is a result of some of the conservation that you've seen in the city. Even though development's been occurring, it's been fairly flat. If we were to follow your growth projections without any additional reduction in per capita use, that would be the red line at the top. The state has established a conservation goal for the Provo region. And if we follow that reduction in per capita use, that gives us the light blue line. The light blue line is in consultation with staff, is the number that we have used for planning purposes for the city. Let me know if there's any questions along the way.
So is the state mandate a per capita number or just a number for our city?
The state goals are established based on per capita water use. Okay. Okay, so we have those demands. We're looking at satisfying those demands. We've analyzed your water supply, and we talked about this again about a year ago, but just as a refresher. The bad news is that your aquifer capacity, meaning the water under the ground, is limited. We're seeing falling groundwater levels throughout the city, which would suggest that we're pulling more water out than is naturally going into the ground. And so even though you have a lot of groundwater rights on paper, your ability to use that water may be limited because of physical limitations of the aquifer. The good news is that you have additional surface water rights, primarily in the Provo River, available to meet those future demands if you can make use of them. So the recommended solution, which you've already been pursuing, is to take advantage of those surface water rights and help meet the needs of your groundwater by the concept of managed aquifer recharge. And so that is your new treatment plant. You're taking water from the Provo River, treating, putting it into the ground with the ability to pull that out at a later time, or more than anything, just put it into the ground to maintain the health of your aquifer moving forward. You also need a few additional wells to be able to pull additional water out when it's needed during peaks during the summertime. Yeah.
So I had trouble identifying in the report, factoring in for possible loss of water sources over the long term. So if we have projected snowpack predictions that say we're going to lose 30% of our snowpack in the next 30 years, that's going to affect our surface water rights.
Sure.
Correct. In the same. So can you, maybe you'll get to this eventually, but can you help us understand, because when we have that increased population, you have the aggressive conservation effort line. But if you have declining resources at the same time, it seems like that puts even more stress on everything.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So the way that we deal with uncertainty associated with future supply is that we include a buffer or a redundancy factor associated with potential increases in demand or loss of supply. Now, it's a little bit difficult to show reductions in supply when we don't know exactly where they're going to occur. And so what we do instead is we show it in terms of an increase in demand. So this is an analysis of water during the average year. And so what we've done is the line that I just showed you previously is the dashed black line. That's your projected actual demand. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we don't have supply just to meet that line. We want to make sure we have supply to meet some additional supply to account for all those variabilities associated with water supply and demand. So our planning value is actually this solid black line. Questions or comments on that? Okay. And I know that's maybe not spelled out specifically, and part of that is because the science is uncertain exactly what the magnitude of future effects on supply will be. However, we have included that buffer in there to be able to account for those types of effects.
Do you have a percentage of what that buffer represents in terms of total water supply?
And let's see.
Well, you did-
Remember, I don't remember off the top of my head. It's not 30%. I want to say
I think
it's
it was
closer to
10.
15%.
Am I right? You guys did that, you showed that study that you went back to the 1400s. Showing the water with the rings and showing
Oh, yeah,
that our
right.
drought is no worse than it used to be. And we seem to be in the exact same pattern that we were since the 1400s.
Right, so, and the purpose of that was to show that there have been fluctuations over time
That were
in
comparable.
water supply. And so our recent observations are consistent with what we've seen historically.
Yep.
But again, knowing what the future will be, requires a little bit of a crystal ball. It's fuzzy.
To help answer that question, the very first page that we have down here, a contingency plan for drought. So this is part of some of the planning that Bowen Collins has given us to help answer that question. We have a plan that we're working on to help resolve and make sure we are prepared for those areas. So if you look at that very first slide, this is something that we'll be reviewing in the future.
Yeah, and that's a great point that Gary brings up. There is both a planning aspect ahead of time where we want to make sure we have adequate supplies, but then there's also a drought response plan in which when we get into certain times of difficulty, we have a plan in place of how we can reduce our water demand and still meet the needs of the citizens. And that's that drought contingency plan.
Okay, that slide's in the packet?
The drought contingency?
It's not done.
No,
No.
no.
Can you show that again?
It's a future document, so if we go back. So we're talking water master plan, down here, under regulatory compliance documents, the drought contingency plan here.
So we will be talking about that later, you're saying?
See, we have reviewed it.
Okay.
Right. So
Okay,
I'll stop talking to Mike. So yes, we're working on that to be able to bring that, like it says, we're under compliance to have that prepared and ready to go.
okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question though, because, yeah, it's not specifically shown as a reduction in supply, just because of the uncertainty that's associated there. I want to spend a little more time on this, just talking about how our plan exists to meet future demands. So the blue represents your existing sources. And what you can see is that in the past, you have been required to use way more groundwater than is estimated as the sustainable yield into the aquifer. And that's what that red is. About 2016, you completed the Big Springs project, which brought some additional supply online, which allowed you to limit some of your groundwater withdrawals and got you back into a sustainable area in the average year. However, moving forward, that's not going to be adequate to meet projected needs. And so the concept is we will use managed aquifer recovery to meet those needs. So the first little green bar represents what we can put into the ground and pull out using your existing wells. The light blue on the end represents what additional capacity we would need with future wells to be able to pull out to satisfy your needs. The pink at the top represents water that could go into the aquifer and stay there from year to year in an average year. And so you can see there's quite a bit of water that we're able to sustain the health of the aquifer associated with your treatment plant and your surface water rights. I'm going to flip over to the dry year and you'll see the picture changes a little bit. So in this particular case, our existing sources drop down, and our springs don't yield as much as they do in a wet year. Our Provo River rights don't yield as much, so those existing sources drop down. You can see that in those dry years, we're actually forced to go and take a little extra water from the aquifer in those dry years at this point in time. But moving forward, what we'll be able to do is satisfy most of the demand simply by taking those Provo River rights, putting them into the ground to be able to recover as through existing wells or future wells moving forward. Now, as we get far out, or to your point, if we had a reduction in some sort of supplies, what we would need to do is we would need to go into the yellow. And the yellow represents water that we're not putting in a dry year, but we're actually pulling out of the aquifer to meet needs in those dry years. But we can do that because of the deposit we've put in the bank in those average years that we can then pull out during the dry years. So that's the big strategy that you have been working on for a number of years, but it's being confirmed by what we've looked forward as meeting the future needs of the city. I'm going to move on to other topics than water supply, so just pause for any questions on that. Okay, seeing none, let's talk about storage. Okay, so this is not talking specifically about like storage like in Jordanelle Reservoir. This is talking about the tanks and reservoirs that exist in the city to supply your water needs. So we looked at your capacity very first of all, and looking at how much you need for daily fluctuations, emergency storage, and fire flow. And we concluded that the one area that you have a need is in the Rock Canyon zone, and it needs an additional 750,000 gallons, and that's a build out of that total need. There is an existing need today, but that's the total need to build out. So this is actually pretty good news. You, from a capacity standpoint, you have a lot of storage, and you have what you need for your projected demands. We then did a storage condition evaluation. And the good news is we found most of your tanks are in very good or good condition. However, the main and gallery are in fair condition. Those are the tanks near the empty steer temple. And they're actually in pretty good condition, with one exception that they were designed with not to meet current seismic codes. And so if we were to have an earthquake, primarily, I can, what's my concrete tank?
Main is steel, concrete is the gallery.
Yeah, gallery in particular, concrete tank without the seismic design may not be operable after a seismic event, an earthquake. So that's one of the primary concerns there. The one tank in poor condition is the old Slate Canyon tank, not to be confused with your new Slate Canyon tank, I suppose. That's one that we would recommend you look at replacing in the near term. So, increase storage at Rock Canyon, replace the Slate Canyon, and then do some other minor maintenance projects. Even some of those tanks that are good or very good, they have steel components that break down and corrode over time. So you just need to replace those much more often than the main structure itself. Total recommended associated with storage is 18 million. Okay, let's talk about your distribution system. Pipes that get water throughout the city. We use a hydraulic model of your system. All the pipes are entered in along with all the demands. On the left-hand side is pressures today. Green is great. The blue is a little bit on the low side. Yellow and orange are still meeting state standards, but less than desirable. Anything below that, red and black, mean that they don't meet state standards. Today, you look very good. There's a few areas in the Grandview area that would be nice to bring up just a little bit. But with projected demands moving forward, results at build out, if you made no other improvements in your system, what you can see is we have lots of problems. The water, the pipelines just aren't big enough to get the water to where it's needed and sustain pressures. So to address those, we've identified a number of projects. This is a relatively small number of projects for a city of your size, which means you've done a good job staying on top of your planning and improvements. But there are a number of improvements that need to happen. And if we make those improvements at build out, we get what's on the right, which is a system that performs very well. That Grandview area is just a little bit tough. It's right at the top of the pressure zone, so it's tough to get any higher, but pretty good performance.
And I just want to be clear. So, and this is the 10-year projection. So
This one here is at build out.
we,
2070.
Sorry.
so it's at what year?
This is essentially build out. So this is 2070 demands with all the improvements made.
Oh, got it.
We looked at 10-year and said, what do we have to do in the 10-year to make it maintain? We just didn't want to overwhelm you with figures here.
Now, considering these updates, would these updates take care of our issues with the Northeast area as far as capacity?
Yeah, so there's specific.
Like,
We don't want this word. I don't either. I'm excited to see what I'm gonna say. No, there's specific pipes at specific areas that would need to be in place to allow certain density. So you don't necessarily do all these for all the projects, but there's some that are location sensitive. Did that answer your question?
well, my question is, does this just does this maintain the status quo and keep it up as we need it? Or does this increase capacity such that we could do those new developments on the northeast side?
Okay, now I'm understanding. So yeah, this does everything that's been adopted, but if you're going to add new density, then we'll need to modify this plan to accomplish any addition. So we wanted to only model what is doctrine.
So this is maintaining the status quo in a healthy way.
Or it's maintaining what we've already approved as changes in the general plan. So those areas where we have increased density.
Yeah, so what you've already approved, what the state required us to do that are official densities we have to live with, either the ones around the UBX stations or the general plans, the local plans that you did adopt, those are all taken care of. The Northeast plan is being talked about, but it's not adopted. And there's discussion of a bunch of density around the mall that is not adopted. So we did not plan for those until some changes are made.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna invite Gary up here to talk about this a little bit, just in terms of we talked about capacity of your pipelines. You also need to consider condition of your pipelines, and this just really quick is a map with the age of your pipelines. For your information for comparison purposes, the average life of a metallic pipe in the United States when it fails is 53 years. So that's some recent data that's come out from Utah State. So you have 2% of your system that is at 76 to 100 plus years. So that those are doing great. They're outliving, the average lifespan, but they probably are not going to last forever. And we have 21% of our system in 51 to 75 years, which is also really towards the end of its lifespan. So, and the other ages are shown there, but those are kind of the ones that we're concerned about. It's about a quarter of your system is essentially reached the average life of a metallic pipeline. Gary's going to talk a little bit more about what this means and how to move forward.
I told my staff 5 minutes, so I'm going to see if I can do it. First of all, I want you to, I'm going to ask a couple of questions with the council, anybody else except for my staff. Does anybody know how much water Provo City produced yesterday in millions of gallons? Just a rough estimate, just
13.
higher.
1,000.
Yeah, okay,
Is it 30 million gallons?
higher.
50.
42
and a half yesterday.
42.5 million yesterday. So, that was yesterday. Does anybody know where our water comes from besides heaven? Okay. Since Becky read the master plan, where's it come from, Becky?
First, we do the springs.
Okay.
Second, we do the wells. And the last priority would be the surface water, which would be what the storage in Jordanelle or the storage, what comes down the Provo River and all that, right?
Okay, very good. During the winter months, most of the water that the residents bring comes from our springs. Almost 100%, is that correct, Ryan? By the way, this is Ryan York back here. Ryan is the manager over our water distribution group. And just so I can pat Ryan on the back from up here, I want you all to be aware that last year, Provo City had the 3rd best water in the country. 3rd best. Okay. So, we're applauding him, but there's a lot of other people before him that helped us get to this point. We're still trying to figure out who number 1 and number 2 are. Okay, now, when I say the top 3, just for your information, there are 148,000 public water entities out there. And we're number 3. Okay, so that is very good. We have a very good system. However, we still have issues that we're trying to resolve, and we're trying to continue to keep that system in a top-notch system in control. I'm going to talk just a little bit about distribution. So I got some exhibits. Can you hear me if I do? So I'm over here.
You can pick it up.
Back in the good old days, the standard water line was 4 inches. In our city, currently, we have, if you look at your master plan, over 20%, I think it's 25, around 25% of the city is in 4-inch water line or smaller in size. That's what the standard used to be. Okay. By the way, this box is pretty heavy, just with the exhibits I have. The new standard, most of the pipe, I will say between railroad tracks, 9th East, 9th North, this part, the standard where the majority of our pipe are 6-inch. Okay, this is the size. And by the way, this is ductile iron. Okay, our water operators love ductile iron. It's easy to repair and to work with. Okay, so there's the 6-inch line. And we also use PVC, but we prefer to use ductile iron. Okay. The standard that we use now with the state, which is mandated, is 8-inch. So every new subdivision, it's an 8-inch line. Okay, this is the standard for every new subdivision with 8-inch. As we are doing development, a lot of time, we, especially in the downtown area where our densities are higher, we have a lot of this, and we will ask the developer to model, give us his demands. And if the demands exceed what the capacity is of that 60-inch line, we tell them that they need to meet the demand, whether it's 8-inch or larger. And say, for example, they can get their demand with an 8-inch. What we try to do in our budget, we actually have an upsizing item, and we will ask the developer. We'll ask the developer to install a 12-inch. So this is what we're trying to get in our downtown area where our higher densities are. So you can see how we are eventually going up and up and up in size. Okay. Like I said, this is PVC. You can see it's much thicker, but when this breaks, it's bad breaks. Right, Pierce?
Right.
Okay. Now,
How does that last
compared
to iron?
what's that?
How does that last compared to iron?
They both basically have the same service life. Okay. Inside of this, that was when they manufactured this, they put a concrete slurry on the inside of this. Pretty cool. But when you put this in the ground, we have to wrap it with plastic. But this is a very strong pipe. And up where, say, where the mayor lives, ever so slight movements of the ground, this is the kind of pipe we want on the ground. Okay? At least my opinion is. Okay, so next question is, we got all these distribution, we got almost 600 miles, 570 miles of pipe. So we got 25% of our city is this, 25, and these are rough numbers, it's 20 something. 25% of that, and where's what 8-inch? Another 25%, so 75%, boom, boom, boom. Okay, now the next question, how does the water get from this to your house? Any idea? I'll tell you. Thanks for asking. Okay. What we do is we drill a hole into this pipe. This is called a cork. Okay. Now, in the good old days, when people didn't know what was going on, we put galvanized pipe. Now, this is nasty stuff. So we try to get everybody that has galvanized lines going into their houses, and you can see how it corrodes. That's on the inside and the outside. Yeah. This one here just happened to have two rocks were just rubbing against it. That is the old, yeah.
It's a fluke.
Okay, but that is galvanized. We can replace this every chance we get. It's almost impossible to do repairs on this. Okay. What we do now is we run either a poly line, this is flexible, put a tracer wire with this, or this is copper. This is 1-inch. Service lines used to be 1/2 inch, then 5/8. Now 1-inch, this is to a single family home. Okay. And then when it gets to your property from the main, this is called a yoke. Water comes in from the city side, comes through here. We have a meter, a transponder that goes out to the city system. And basically the city owns from this point to the main, and we have the residents, they're in charge of it from here to there. Okay, that's by code is how we do that. Okay, so this is basically, this is too much information. I didn't bring this, but I wanted you to see what a yoke looks like, because every house has these. There's a can, we put this inside of a can, we call it a can. There's a lid on top of it. It has a little transponder, a little gray thing. So, but yeah, I wanted you to be aware of our system, the age of it, and as we were talking about the master plan, how it seems like we are constantly upsizing our pipes. But this 2% here, I checked on this morning, that is 11 miles of pipe. Okay, and I asked Lane Pierce, okay, and then, well, how much it costs to replace an 8-inch pipe? Last question, how much do you think it costs per foot? These are rough numbers. This includes replacing the pipe and doing the asphalt repairs. Take a guess how much it costs to do 1 foot.
$200.
18.
$18.
I was gonna stay with 18.
$500.
About 500.
Jeez.
just to replace per foot. So a block of water line to replace an 8-inch. About $250,000.
But you wouldn't replace it now with an 8-inch, right? You said 12
Well,
is the standard.
in the residential, not downtown area, I would most likely put back an 8, because I might have a 6 there. I might have another 8, but depending on the site. If I'm up on an established, like on the bench, where I know we're not gonna be growing, increase, I'd replace an 8. Or I might put a 10, okay, depending on, but that's the beauty of what Keith is doing. So just, so you know, Keith has been working with us for over a year to get this document and all these other documents to help us plan and organize so we know how to do it. The goal that we have is to continue to keep our water system at that top notch. Ryan, how many tests do we do a year on our water, just so these people know?
Bacteriological only is about 1,300 tests per year, but then we add, there's about 200 constituents that we're testing for in the water annually.
I brought this here, Ryan gave this to me just a couple weeks ago. Right here, these are all the things that Ryan tests for. I cannot pronounce the names of half of these things that Ryan tests for. Today I was talking with legal on some other issues. And but we are testing down parts per trillion, not parts per million or parts per billion, but parts per trillion for PFAS, which was a topic I had with legal this morning. But we're testing a lot of different things, and these guys are doing an extremely good job. If anybody has any questions on their water, they call Ryan. Ryan will send out his guys. They will sample that water to make sure that resident feels confident that he has good water. Plus, we want to know too. Because the last thing we want is to have a boil or the last thing we want is to run out of water, which is what Keith is helping us do. So I've overrun my 5 minutes. I've got my 5-minute thing like 5 minutes ago. So I'm sorry, but I just want you to be aware of our system. It's a great system, but it needs to be followed and continue to be improved.
Question. How full do you keep that pipe?
How what?
How full do you keep that pipe? Is that still 50%?
These pipes vary the pressure anywhere from 100 to say that our minimum is 50. Okay, so these pipes are under a lot of pressure. I remember many years ago when I was in the engineering department, we had a 12-inch water line break on 12th East and Center Street. That water line lifted that whole intersection up, the asphalt, 12 inches. Okay, this stuff is under a lot of pressure. Okay, it's amazing how much pressure. You have something like this, it'll do a lot of damage really fast.
So we have pressurized water, is what we have. It's not gravity flow water, it's pressurized.
We have gravity flow. What we do is we take the water and then we pump it up to our tanks. And some of the water gets pumped multiple times. Okay, we just talked about the northeast area. It's not part of our plan. That I think is going to require 2 new tanks with multiple booster stations, which we have not included. Okay, but I just wanted you to be aware. So anytime we have new stuff, we have to look at those components of how to do that, because we have this range in which we're supposed to supply water to the residents. That's by state mandate, but also by city code as well. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I hope that helps you understand our distribution system, the need that we have to take, protect it, and to continue to update it. So thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
I appreciate Gary's enthusiasm. He is definitely in the right job. That's a great job there. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping this up. 10-year improvements, just a summary. 137 million associated with source improvements. Most of that is associated with the treatment plant. In fact, I put a note down here. 85 million of the treatment plant is to be paid for by grants or other contributions. So that's not coming out of the city's pockets. Well done getting that funding. 37 million comes through a loan for the treatment plant. And then the balance is some cash funding by the city. But that's the biggest cost right there in the 10-year window. You also include an additional well and some infiltration facilities. Storage, we mentioned 18 million, and then distribution, For installing new or upsizing existing pipes and addressing fire flow needs, there's $28 million identified, total of $184 million. So, we talked briefly about this. I just want to revisit it really quickly. What we did was we said, okay, before we try to lay out a funding plan for this, how much money should the city be spending on the water system? You'll remember that I said the average life of metallic pipe in the United States is at point of failure is 53 years. We looked at a potential service life of 60 years or 80 years. So we take that $500 per foot that Gary mentioned, we look at the value to replace the entire system, and then we either divide it by 60 or we divide it by 80 to get a recommended level of funding. And we think these are possible with some maintenance and care from your team that, you know, we can stretch it to 60 years. 80 years is starting to be a little optimistic and making Ryan nervous, but that's where that is. So that was the 13.7 or up to 18.2 million per year investment. So then what we did was we took all those improvements, we laid them out, including your payments on your loan for the treatment plant, and this is our proposed plan. The range that we identified is shown up at the top in red with pink in the middle here. And then we have proposed making the improvements that are identified moving forward until we can get to the point where we're basically at that lower end of the funding range. So by year 10, we've reached that kind of, I'm going to call it the minimum recommended level of funding, but we've transitioned that in over time. This was presented previously as part of the revenue needs, and what's outlined here was tied with the initial 15% rate increase. So that would, just to let you know, that's what's being reflected on this chart right now. Okay, I think that's it for me. Yes.
So if you have to replace a chunk of pipe, how much does it cost if you have to replace it after there's been a failure? Like when he talked about it exploding out and taking out an intersection, like what percentage more is it to do that repair as opposed to a scheduled replacement?
So the obvious answer that you won't like is it depends. It depends where it's at, but I do have a better answer for you. There was some studies on asset management, and the cost of replacing in an emergency versus a planned replacement on average was 160%. So you have a big break and then it forces you to replace the entire road. It's national data, and this is probably 5-6 years old, is 160% of what it would have been. And I'm sure in certain instances it's 1,000% more, but that's the average.
Yeah. Could you go back a couple of slides? Let's see.
Mike?
Keep going one more. So the installing or upsizing existing pipe, I think it was this one. Would that be all of the black pipe that's at the 80-year mark? Is that what that?
No, right now, what's included in there is the specific pipeline projects that we've identified as needed for growth, and then a budget amount to start chipping away at the black pipe. So if you see the pink at the top here, that's the amount that we have budgeted for rehabilitation and replacement. So I have not worked out with Ryan like how much of the black, and would we start there, would we do some of the red, but anyway.
And then on the slide that shows the grants, this one, so where Where is that money? What grants are those? Or other contributions? What are those? 85 million.
Can somebody from the city help with that?
Yeah, so $50 million came from FEMA, from the federal government as a grant. We also got, the city council appropriated $20 million of our COVID grant money. And we also got 14 million of that same money from the county. And then 37 million bonus from the state.
Okay, that's impressive. And then maybe my last question for now would be, let's see, advance one slide. So these are minimum and preferred annual investment ranges. What are we currently investing? Where are we right now?
So you're right, about here.
Okay.
Is where you're at. And that's not necessarily what you have been. That's what is available under your existing.
7 to 8 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those are really important questions, and I do recall that over the past election season, I think those grants were misperceived by many people in the public as excess spending on the part of the city, not understanding that it was actually our fiscal responsibility exemplified by getting that money so that we could move these projects forward without incurring costs on our citizens. You know, there still is a gap there that we have to pay attention to, but I think that was an extraordinary series of, you know, funding opportunities that our staff were able to take advantage of. I have a question about the MAR versus the ASR. I don't quite that MAR acronym was new to me, and so I didn't quite understand the difference between MAR and ASR.
They are very close together. The differential is that with ASR, there's an intention to put the water in and pull as much as you can back out. That's called aquifer storage and recovery. When we talk, we've changed the acronym, and we meaning the water community, to manage aquifer recovery, when the intention is to put that water in and leave it primarily for the health of the aquifer. So in your particular case, you really kind of have both. You have some that you're putting in just for the health of aquifer, but you do have, as shown in that dry year, some that you intend to put in and pull out.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's, I guess, I always understood aquifer storage and recovery to imply recovery of the aquifer, not this. I mean, I understood we were going to be pulling that water out when we needed it, but I thought the recovery was applying to the aquifer itself, not to the water.
Yeah.
So MAR is just a new industry term to refer to the general management of that water.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're not
fundamentally not
different.
very different.
Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense. Thanks.
Good question. Anything else? Gordon, is it appropriate to talk about what actions we're hoping to achieve here today?
Yeah, I can go to that briefly. So what our goal is today is to introduce you to this master plan. And what we'd like to do is come back in the first city council meeting in August and have this on a regular meeting to adopt this plan. After you've adopted this plan, we'll come back and talk about the other elements that we've talked about, including what we can do for drought and other kinds of things. So if you're comfortable with the plan, I think it's a great plan. I think it's the plan that the city needs to have. I think it's completely independent discussion of what we're going to do, how we're going to get to put all this stuff in the prioritization, and that's going to be part of the next discussions that we would have. So I think this plan allows you to move forward and for us to bring you something to talk about these things in detail.
Council Christensen.
So how does that fit in with the water rate discussion that we've also got on the back burner?
So in terms of water rate, it doesn't have a lot because if you're going to keep the existing rate and we're just making tiers to charge people, the city gets the same amount of income. If we're gonna raise the rate, then it has an impact. But again, you can do it by doing a tier section or just continuing doing our summer, winter rates. So the city council can move forward with either staying with the summer, winter rate or going to a tiered rate. Either one, this plan isn't dependent on.
But it seemed like part of what you were showing is the recommended and the
Okay.
minimal.
So
So that's
a
actually
rate, that's a rate increase.
increase, okay.
That's different than.
Because we were also discussing a rate increase.
So I was trying to stratify the two things.
Okay.
Changing to a rated system can happen independent of a rate.
Yeah, got it,
You
got
can do both independent or do one or the other.
Got it.
You meant tiered.
Tiered,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
tiered.
So when is that coming back to us?
We're planning to bring that back to you in about a month.
So after we approve this,
Are you asking specifically about tiers?
with tiers and the increased rate.
Okay.
That would all come back within about a month.
Okay.
We can do it separately or together. We'll be discussing that in more detail. So that the council feels comfortable what we're going through and we're talking about. And we're gonna really analyze what we should be doing. And we hope to have good information that everybody's gonna be comfortable with.
If I could add, adopting the master plan does not.
Like,
It does not tie you into a rate increase. It doesn't tie you into anything. It just says at build out, we want these pieces of infrastructure in place to meet what the general plan said. It has no, at a future date, you decide how we're gonna fund it. Today, we have a certain funding stream and we will use that funding stream to accomplish this plan. So we will move forward with this plan regardless of a rate increase or tiering.
Councilor Whipple.
yeah, so I appreciate that this plan goes through our system, our existing needs and assets and everything. It does say pretty clearly, though, that city investment in the system has been about $6 million a year. And that it does need to go up to $14 to $18 million a year. And so it seems that if we adopt this plan, we are also acknowledging that we need to more than double the amount of money that we're spending on the system in order to meet the build out and the goals of this.
So again, everything's about a timeline. When are things going to happen? What's the future going to be? I do not believe this document requires you to adopt any increase at this point. If you want to achieve the recommendations of this document, you can do that with rate increases and other kinds of opportunities and things we're looking at. But we'll come back with ideas on how we can fund this, and that will be a whole separate discussion. I think the key to this is I think it's important for you to see the infrastructure that we think needs to be done and a timeline we think it needs to be done and a cost that should be done in. But again, all these costs are today costs. And I can tell you after experiencing the last 3 years, those costs are great for today, but all the number and the dates, when we look at like the transportation master plan, we had certain projects we were going to do. Some of those get done is because we had the funding, some didn't. The same with the water master plan. Those are decisions and policies you're going to make at a later date. So I think this document supports what you've approved in the general plan. It gives rough timelines, rough dollars, but at the end of the day, you're going to, that is an independent discussion, an independent decision. You're not locked into anything today. Or when you vote on this next, yeah.
Councilor Hanley.
So I'm wondering about the population predictions. I think I saw 216,000 people in 2070. And I'm curious, so all of these numbers are based on the assumption that that's what we, and that's because we've got to have a number there. And I'm just curious, you said, I think I heard you say that's based on the assumption that we would build out all of available based on our plans and so on.
This comes from the gentleman. So he's pulling this from the planning department, not So water department didn't come up with any of those numbers. Those are base numbers of our general plan.
Okay, so 216 is in our general plan? I don't remember that number.
Your general plan does not identify a specific population.
Okay,
Your general plan identifies potential densities.
okay,
And this is where engineers and planners get in fistfights sometimes because we want specific numbers and they like it a little more flexible. But based on the densities that are potentially identified, it could result in this number. I'm gonna just anticipate a question, which is what if we don't build that dense? The one thing I want to emphasize on this is you have two components of demand. You have your indoor demand, you have your outdoor demand. Reducing your density does not reduce your outdoor demand. In fact, it tends to increase it. And so I think these are important numbers to know, but I think the impact of that density on water is limited. On sewer, it's a very different thing because it's tied straight to indoor demands, but.
okay, yeah, I mean, basically, it sounds like, yeah, you've answered my question to my satisfaction, because I was a little worried that we were using a number not based on what's actually buildable in Provo, and it might be like a Utah County number that is projected, and then we're, you know, carving out a BY or a Provo allotment for that amount, and that, you know,
Yeah.
I've just always had the assumption that there are other parts of Utah County that are going to grow faster than Provo can because we don't have as much available land. But if it's based on our anticipated and projected planning densities, then that seems like an appropriate way to do it.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a couple questions from the document.
People.
It's probably for the administration, probably for you, your people, Gordon. Okay. I'm just curious about the Provo River non-irrigation season water that we have. We can use up to 65 CFFs of water outside the irrigation season. But there seems to be no knowledge on specific volume. Do we ever use that? Is that water we've ever used?
Yeah, that's Shane's.
Shane Jones.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Shane Jones with Water Department. So we do have 65 CFS of non-irrigation water, winter water. It's a better. There we go. That's better.
Yeah.
It's disputed by the larger water community, the big water districts, or water users, Central Utah Water District, as far as an interpretation of that right and what we can use. That water is currently being adjudicated as all water rates in Utah are. And we've got our fingers crossed that we'll get our day in court shortly and be able to convince the judge that we have a right to all of that water.
Okay, so as of right now, we don't use it.
As of right now, we, I won't make the statement that we don't use it.
Okay. Next question.
Okay.
Hamblin, our Hamblin water right, is that a water right that we get paid for or not? Do we make money off that water right to the Hamblin water right?
No, we made an exchange with that water right so that we actually swap water with Central Utah Water District that provides it.
Okay, we're just switching at the convenience.
Yeah,
of
we're just
the-
switching around
Okay.
so that we can take more water out of South Fork.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Those, by the way, excellent questions going right for the water rights jugular. That was good. I'm impressed. Some of
All right.
the toughest things to understand, really.
Any other questions? Councilor Whipple.
How much time do we? Okay. I had a question where we're talking about fully developed land irrigated by land use type. So this explicitly excludes irrigation of agricultural properties using secondary water. Do any of our agricultural properties use our treated water, or do we anticipate that they would in the future?
So I think the answer is no on existing, Ryan, correct? Okay, yeah, I'm not
Okay.
aware of any that uses it. So in the future, it would only be if they developed into a municipal type property.
Right, so once an agricultural piece becomes municipal, then they're no longer using whatever water rights or secondary water they've used before. They hook into our system and we're then responsible for that.
Correct, correct. And so you might be asking what happens to their water. And I think that's part of the city's overall plan and portfolio is to use those Provo River rights and other rights as they become available.
Okay. On the aquifer, I like the idea that we could do recharge by idling the wells if we're using more of the surface water. It's my understanding from reading this document and from other documents in the past that we've been effectively mining our aquifer over a period of time.
That's essentially what that red is up at the top.
Yes.
It's yeah, more coming out than going in.
So do we think that with our MIR plan that we will be able to reverse that trend so that we can bring the aquifer back up to its full capacity?
Absolutely. That is.
And what timeline for that recovery?
That's a tougher question. I'm not sure. Do you have any more information on that?
No, I want to just make up something. So the state has said we've been in a drought for 20 years, 20-year drought, and we're just seeing problem with our aquifer. So that tells us once we get it back up the system, we're basically again, I don't know how much juice we're gonna be using, but you can extrapolate the magnitudes, we'll have a long period of storage again. So the timeline, again, I don't know how long it takes to fill because how many more years are gonna be wet years versus dry years? Actually, Keith knows that, but he's not gonna disclose it in this meeting. And so we're going to see good years that are gonna keep adding to it, and then we'll have some down years. And so that's what makes this plan so incredibly flexible, is that instead of just running the water out of the system, we are literally storing it in our good years. This is the story of the grasshopper and the ants. So
Yeah, but we also want to add more wells into the aquifer. So when we have those peak demands or dry years, we can really just suck that stuff up. And so it feels like we'd be incrementally improving it and then drop it back. Is that not right?
I don't think it goes like that, but I think the intent is to have the ability. They're building this whole system for 2 days in July at midnight. That's what this whole system is built for. And so when that day hits, that moment, every tank has to be full just before that starts. Our wells have to be ready to go. And it's not that we're drawing out for that whole year. It's that peak moments that he cares about, that everybody cares about. They don't care about that moment. The rest is fine in the system. Shoot, I can even run it during the rest of the year. So that was an insult to me. But that is what they're building for, is that peak moment. And so it's not just a draining, but during those peak months, it's gets it hit hard, but it allows for good times for us to be putting it in fairly regular.
Yeah, well, I really am very supportive of the ASR now MIR project. Because I don't want our aquifer to become unusable. Yeah, I don't want it to collapse. I want us to keep that as an asset. And I love that the water in there will not evaporate and will not spill out if there's a seismic event that compromises the dam. So I'm really, really glad that you're working on that.
Right, anyone else? Counselor Garrett.
Maybe if, Gordon, if we could just maybe end where we started, back to that recognition for the third best water system in the nation out of thousands. How is that measured? I mean, many of us think of the quality of the water, the taste, access. What are the measurements they use to
I'm gonna have to turn it over. I just thought because we had good looking employees, but apparently that wasn't it. Ryan, they're gonna tell us how this works, so.
Least contaminated and least amount of violations with the state.
Wow, okay, that's all. Nothing to do with the system, with the build out. Wow, okay.
But I think,
The end of it all.
I would say this, if you're having that few violations and that quality of water, it's because your source is good, your management is good.
Yeah.
Your system is in tip top shape.
Yeah,
You're not going to achieve that and your water's gonna taste bad.
right.
I can take you to places where the water tastes bad and you say, I think they need work on their system. So.
Well, I will say, as often as we've had visitors here from out of state, they always comment on the quality of the water, taste of the water.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
Very helpful, thank you.
All right. Well, we are just ahead of everything. We will take a break. Do you want to start? When do you want to start the closed session at the earliest?
Scheduled to start 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
That's 4 o'clock.
All right. We will be meeting again at 4 o'clock for a closed session. So with objection, we'll now recess the Provo Municipal Council work meeting until the council's closed meeting and reconvene as the redevelopment agency for a closed meeting by unanimous consent.
Well, we're gonna reconvene.
Okay, we will reconvene as the Provo Municipal Council for a closed meeting by unanimous consent.
Here in open meeting.
Okay.
We can't recess now. Now, what we could do, I guess, in fact, let's do this. Let's take both, we have to do two different votes, one for the council and one for the other. Let's go ahead and take the votes now to close the meeting.
Okay.
Then we'll recess and then we can actually start the closed session in the reading.
Okay.
So what we need to do, because there are 4 topics for closed meeting, 3 of which.
Brian.
Yeah.
Are we worried about time now? Should we get everyone here?
Well, I thought somebody told me they saw Scott in the building, so.
We've got them queued up, so.
I mean, the first 3 items we could probably just go ahead with. I just don't know if the RDA people know, but they can, if they're last, then we can probably get them. So I think we're probably ready to start. So the issue is this, that there's 4 closed meeting topics, 3 of which pertain to the municipal council and 1 which pertains to the RDA governing board. So right now we're convened as the council. The 3 topics for the council are 2 that have to do with character and competence of an individual and 1 that has to do with pending litigation. So what I'd like to do is suggest that someone make a motion to a councilor make a motion to close the meeting to discuss those 3 items. We need a second and we'll vote on that. But then before we actually close, we're going to switch to the RDA and take the same vote as the RDA on a different topic. So I'll get there in a second. So first, we're looking for a motion to close the meetings.
Okay, I'll make a motion to close the meeting for the items presented by Brian. Okay.
I'll second that.
So we'll take a vote on the closed meeting. Councilor Hanley,
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple,
Yes.
Councilor Christensen.
Yes.
Councilor Garrett
Yes.
and Councilor Bogdan.
Yes.
Now, if we could briefly recess as the council and reconvene as the RDA governing board, then I'll address the closed meeting item that will go before the board. Thank you. So if you would.
That's so weird that we vote to close the meeting and then we recess. But we can do that.
It is, but if we don't, and well, because, and that's why I'm following the formalities of,
Yeah.
we're recessing and then we're recessing again. If we don't do that, we have to come back in here and reopen the meeting to take the
Yeah.
vote on the record.
Okay.
So,
So does Catrice need
yes,
to?
so Catrice, if you can recess the council and turn the.
Oh, I am, okay, with no objection, we'll now recess for the municipal council
And reconvene as the.
and reconvene as the redevelopment agency.
Okay. And now the governing board of the redevelopment agency of Provo will consider a motion to close the meeting.
Correct. And so, and specifically, the motion is to hold a closed meeting in the, what do we call this? In the pre-function room following the council closed meeting. Okay? And that meeting will be to talk about a sale of property, which again is a reason under the state statute for a closed meeting.
Okay,
So we're looking for a motion to hold a closed meeting of the RDA governing board following the closed meeting of the municipal council.
all right. Do we have a motion?
I make the motion of what Brian said.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. So we will now hold a vote on that motion. Board Member Garrett,
Yes.
Board Member Bogdan.
Yes.
Board Member Handley.
Yes.
Board Member McKay.
Yes.
Board Member Rachel Whipple, yes. And Board Member Craig Christensen.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, perfect. So that passes. So now we will recess.
okay,
Recess as the RDA governing board and reconvene in closed meeting as the municipal council.
okay. So with no objection, we will now recess as the governing board of the redevelopment agency for a closed meeting
Of the municipal
of
council.
the municipal council by unanimous consent. Okay.
At what time?
Recording stopped.
Boy, we